The United States faces another setback in its extradition bid. Julian Assange is able to bring his extradition case to the UK Supreme Court. On Monday, London's High Court said that the Assange extradition case could go before the UK's highest court. This is an unexpected decision as the legal bar was high. There has to be a fundamental problem with the UK's Extradition Act to get to the UK Supreme Court. The judges took that for granted. The written justification for the decision is still pending. Assange launched the WikiLeaks platform, which makes documents publicly available to everyone. He has been in extradition custody in Belmarsh Maximum Security Prison since 2020. After 7 years in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, the British judiciary will rule on his extradition to the United States. There, he is said to face allegations of espionage in connection with WikiLeaks. Up to 175 years in prison could be imposed if convicted. The extradition process has already taken a few legal turns. The United States last won its appeal in December 2021 against a previous ruling that had initially denied extradition due to mental health risks to Assange. The 50-year-old Assange is considered suicidal. The US prison conditions and contact restrictions in prison are not reasonable for him. However, following the US appeal, the London High Court ruled that Great Britain may transfer the Australian WikiLeaks co-founder. The diplomatic assurances given by the Americans on the conditions of detention should be trusted. Assange's lawyers can now have this decision of the Court of Appeal reviewed by the two judges, Lord Chief Justice Lord Ian Burnett and Lord Justice Timothy Holroyd, at the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom following this decision. Because the diplomatic assurances from the US side were only brought before the Court of Appeal, so they were not available to the first instance. Here the judges saw a fundamental issue for the Supreme Court to decide, namely, under what conditions an appellate court from the state seeking extradition must include such diplomatic promises in its sentencing if they were not given to the lower court. So, the London High Court sees a fundamental legal problem, but the Australian remains in custody. Assange has 14 days to go to the Supreme Court. The extradition proceedings are thus interrupted. But whether the court will also accept the case is not certain. Christine Raffinson, spokesman for WikiLeaks, called the assurances given by the US side absurd. These assurances were only given after the United States had lost in court and extradition had been stopped due to the unacceptable conditions of detention. You have to tell me if her name is right. Raffinson described the decision as only a partial success because it will probably be months before the Supreme Court decides if it takes up the case. He could not estimate whether more weeks or more months would pass. Assange is not in good health. This was also emphasized by Stella Morris, Assange's fiancée, who only made a very brief statement at the courthouse. She said she very much hopes the Supreme Court will take up the case. She also wrote on Twitter shortly after the decision that the Supreme Court must now decide whether to hear Assange. Her fiancé is suffering greatly in prison, she explained outside the courthouse. All international journalist associations and numerous human rights organizations have criticized the fact that the United States is continuing to press ahead with the extradition request. The case is considered to be a precedent for endangering freedom of the press, since the Australian is threatened with long prison sentences for typical journalistic activities. The conditions under which journalists can observe British court proceedings have also repeatedly been judged to be inadequate and unprofessional. The corona infections, which were rampant in Great Britain, had made reporting even more difficult. With the decision, the waiting journalists had again received no advance notice as to whether they were even allowed to take part in the announcement of the decision. This also affected the planned video access. Journalists were only granted access minutes before the decision was made. If the UK Supreme Court decides against taking Assange's case, his case will go back to the Westminster Magistrates Court to be brought before UK Home Secretary Priti Patel. She would then ultimately have to make the decision to extradite. But even the minister's decision would inevitably meet with legal resistance. And I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.